Hey guys, welcome back to Master of Lore. Today we're diving back into some Middle Earth, of course. It is my favorite. I know I always say that, but why not reiterate it, right? Today we're going to be talking about something that a lot of people don't really understand in Tolkien's universe of Middle Earth, that being the Great Eagles. So we're going to dive right into it. I'm obviously going to comment on the passage that I'm going to read to, and we'll get right into that. Eagles, noblest of the winged creatures of Arda, were the eagles, for they were brought forth by two mighty Valar, Manwë, lord of the air, and Yavanna, queen of the earth. The eagles were numbered amongst the most ancient and wisest of races. They were made before the stars were rekindled and the elves awoke. In the ages that followed, these birds were always messengers and servants of Manwë. Now, we have discussed this prior. Manwë was one of the most powerful of the Valar. So, on Tanquil, the great mountain, the eagles would rest, clasping the high crags with crooked hands. Over all the azure world they flew, for they were the eyes of Manwë, and like thunderbolts fell on his foes. I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but that is a really interesting thing that is said here. They flew, for they were the eyes of Manwë. So think about that when we get to the end of this video. In the first age of sun, a mighty breed of this race lived in Beleriand. They were called the eagles of the encircling mountains, and they lived in high eyries on the peaks called Chrysaegrim. Eyries, that's really interesting when you think of the Eyrie from Game of Thrones. These eagles were far famed for their deeds in the War of the Jewels. Their lord was Thorondor, and he was the largest and most majestic of all the eagles. The wingspread of Thorondor was 30 fathoms, and the speed of the bird outstriped the fastest storming wind. Thorondor was the strong and fearless, and he was perpetually fought the evil creatures of the earth. It was Thorondor who rescued Maedhros, the Noldor lord, from a pinnacle of Thangorodrim. He also brought the broken body of King Fingolfin back from Angband and scarred the face of Morgoth with his long talons. Morgoth is also Melkor, so don't be confused there. In the quest of the Silmaril, both Beren and Luthien was rescued from Angband by Thorondor. And though Gondolin finally fell through treachery, the eagles guarded that hidden Noldor kingdom for many centuries. Thorondor and his people earned their greatest glory in the War of Wrath. The Quinta Silmarillion tells how the eagles were victorious in the great battle against even the most terrible evil-winged creatures, the fire drakes. In the third age of Sun, Gwaihir, the Wind Lord, ruled over the eagles of Middle-earth. Though he was not the size of even the least of the eagles of the first age, by the measure of the third age, he was the greatest winged being in that day. Gwaihir's people, the eagles of the Misty Mountains, were fierce and much feared by the dark powers. The long tale of the quest of the ring and the war tells how Gwaihir and his brother Landrovil, and one named Menendor the Swift, often advanced in battle with the eagles' host. The eagles of the Misty Mountains did many great deeds. They helped to achieve the death of the dragon of Erebor, and later the defeat of the orcs in the Battle of the Five Armies. They also rescued the wizard Gandalf and the hobbit Ringbearers, and they fought in the last battle of the Ring War before the Black Gate of Mordor. So really interesting here. So Gwaithir, the Wind Lord, he was an eagle from the first age. He wasn't as big as the original eagles, so they were bigger than what we saw in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Of course, we know that Gwaihir is the eagle that Gandalf rode to pick up Samwise and Frodo Baggins from the Mount Doom to essentially save them so they wouldn't burn to death with the ring. Now, if we go back, so there was something I was thinking about earlier, for they were the eyes of Manwë. So they weren't necessarily controlled by Manwë, but I have to assume that the Valar wanted the elves to come back. The elves were dwindling on Middle-earth. They were essentially about to die with the destruction of the ring. You have to believe that Manwë wanted the ring destroyed, not only to return his children of the elves, but to essentially rid Middle-earth of evil. So, we're like, oh, why didn't the why didn't the Eagles join in earlier? Well, it wasn't as dire of a situation. At least in my own personal opinion, you have to think that Manwë, he recognized the great deeds of the hobbits for being. You have to think about it like this too. The hobbits weren't powerful creatures. They were people that everyone overlooked. You know what I mean? And the fact that they were able to achieve such a great deed in destroying the One Ring, it was obviously recognized by Manwë, and he wanted to save them. And you have to think too that they allowed them to come back to Arda, and join the Valar after Frodo did his deed. And then of course Samwise lived out his days and then joined Frodo in Arda to live out the rest of his life, which I'm assuming they lived forever. Like, you know, if you think about that, they probably did live forever. But anyway, just some interesting food for thought. Figured you guys would want a little bit more info on the Eagles. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Please click that like and subscribe button, and make sure to comment in the comment section what you guys want to see. If you're interested in any more Middle Earth, tell me what you want to hear about Middle Earth. If you're interested in other stuff like The Witcher, Game of Thrones, I love Game of Thrones, and I'd love to talk about it. So yeah, take care guys, and have a good one.